YouTubers, and in this tutorial I am going to be playing mode of airports, which is one of the most played series on my YouTube channel, so yeah.
Direction, orientation, and position. He now had to rely on his much smaller standby instruments while the captain continued to fly the plane by hand. Their aircraft was falling apart before their very eyes, and the crew had no idea why. What system would they use next? Passengers were as yet unaware of the extent of the aircraft. They had no idea that in the back of the captain's mind, now creeping its way forwards, was the possibility that he may have to ditch the aircraft in the sea. One thing was certain: the pilots weren't going to descend any further until they were absolutely sure that what was happening to their plane. The captain leveled off at 15,000 feet and took out the quick reference handle. He needed to find out whether the aircraft's different problems were somehow connected. The autopilot tripping off, the blank screens, the failing navigation instruments, and the dodgy radios. What did all of these have in common? The captain followed the steps in the manual, taking note of the head display on the magnetic compass and inserting it into the flight management computer. The idea here was that the plane was so badly lost, having built up a picture of where it was based on incorrect data from the faulty IRU, that the only salvation could be from inputting data from a much more basic instrument of magnetic compass. But when the captain entered this information, it didn't have the desired effect. The plane's instruments still disagreed. The checklist said that if the pilots were unable to enter the plane's heading into the flight management computer, they should use the keyboard on the overhead panel to enter it directly into the inertial reference system. But the pilots didn't do this. By this point, they were so overwhelmed by all of the failures and confusion that they failed to follow through with the checklist. Human pilots, after all, are just a part of a much bigger system. And when that system starts to break down, pilots join the rest of the system in being more vulnerable to error, rather than less. But the troubleshooting persisted, however imperfectly. The pilots needed to find some way of unhooking the plane's navigation systems from the faulty inertial reference unit and hooking them back up to the working one. Above their heads, the IRU-2 fault light had illuminated, the very ones that had lit up on the ground back at Jakarta. It signified that the right side inertial reference unit wasn't working, and that the pilots would need to switch back to the left-hand one. For this exact purpose, a switch existed, which would transfer all of the plane's navigation systems to the functioning inertial reference system, in this case, IRS-1. The captain flicked this switch, and then checked his instruments. But strangely, after he did this, the magnetic compass and the navigation display still disagreed about which direction the plane was pointing. Whatever issue the aircraft had, switching its navigation source hadn't solved it. However, much to the pilot's relief, moving this switch did at least have one positive effect. The first officer's instrumentation had now flickered back to life. But the pilot's relief didn't last long. According to the first officer's navigation display, the plane was now just a few miles from the Makassar radio beacon and was heading straight forward. All it took was a simple glance out his window to disconfirm this prospect. The plane was nowhere near Makassar. The pilot's attempts to reconfigure the navigation equipment had been woefully unsuccessful. They then consulted their charts and tried contacting other air traffic control centers near Makassar. They figured that they had to be within radio range of at least some of them.
Hansaline 385.
The problem was much greater than pilots realized, though. They were checking the radio frequencies for airports on Sulawesi, the island on which Makassar was situated, over 500 kilometers to the north. None of these airports were even close to being within range. Running out of options, the pilots now had to resort to another way of fixing their position. They knew that along the airway they were supposed to be traveling on, there were navigation aids which they could tune into using their radios. Perhaps by tuning into these beacons, they could figure out where they were and get back on track. They checked their maps, picked out radio beacons along the airway. They tuned the frequencies of these beacons into the navigation radios and watched their instruments closely. But the needles never came to light. Just as it was with air traffic control, the aircraft was simply too far from any of these beacons to pick them up. The pilot was baffled. Was it that they were roughly in the right place, but that their instruments weren't working? Or were they way off track with instruments which were working? There were other radio beacons nearby, which were within range of the pilots, but without even a vague idea about where they were, how would the pilots even know to tune into these? In order to figure out precisely where they were, they would first need to start out with at least a rough idea of where they were. But as the seconds ticked on, it began to look increasingly unlikely that they would even get that. This was much more than an embarrassing mistake for the pilots. They had messed up badly, put themselves and everybody else on board in grave danger. At this point, they began to grow desperate. The captain asked one of the flight attendants whether she knew if anybody on board was from Makassar. If they were, perhaps they would be able to tell if the island beneath them was their own. But the flight attendant didn't want to do this. The passengers were already concerned, and she didn't want to send them into a full-blown panic. The aircraft now had less than 1 hour of fuel remaining. With no navigation equipment but their own eyes, the pilots had to find a runway fast and get the plane down onto it. This would not be an easy task, given the mountainous and densely forested terrain below it. What's more, not just any runway would do. They needed to find one which was big enough to take a Boeing 737. The captain began rolling his aircraft from side to side, looking down at the island beneath him. Somewhere there must be a runway. But as the minutes ticked on, all he could see were more mountains and jungle. A terrifying possibility now entered his mind. He may have to ditch the aircraft in the sea. The odds of surviving a ditching are close to zero, and they're even worse when rescue crews don't even know where to look. The captain knew that if he decided to put the plane down in the water, it would probably amount to a death sentence for everyone on board. But at this point, he feared that he may not have a choice. He told the cabin crew that he may have to ditch the aircraft at the sea, and that they should listen out for him to give the order to prepare for them. Flight 782 sailed quietly above the island of Sumba, its passengers fearing the worst, and its pilots desperately trying to find something to land. Then, as the captain banked the aircraft, the first officer spotted something out his window. Far below them, on one side of the island, lay a thin strip of concrete. The pilots had found a runway. With little time to waste, and really with little choice, the captain decided that this is where he was going to plane now. He reduced power in the engines, put the aircraft into a descent. He then handed control over to the first officer, telling him to bring the plane down to 2,500 feet and to reduce its speed to 220 knots. This slower speed and lower altitude would allow the pilots to better judge whether the runway they had spotted was suitable for their aircraft. If it was too short, they could end up running off the end of it and crashing into the dense forest to lay there and wait. Even though they had found a runway, the pilots were, so to speak, not out of the woods yet. With the first officer flying the plane, the captain made one last-ditch effort to figure out where the aircraft was. He compared the shape of the coastline on his maps to the shoreline he could see out his windows and passed on this information to other pilots over the radio. These pilots checked their maps and looked out at the coastlines they could see, but they couldn't match this up with what the captain was telling them. The reason for this was simple. The captain's estimation of the plane's position was about 500 kilometers off. He was still convinced that he was flying over Sulawesi, the island on which Makassar was situated. In reality, he was all the way to the south, over the island of Sumba. Frustrated with his inability to fix his position, the captain finally accepted that he wasn't going to figure out where he was. His main priority now had to be making sure that the plane landed safely. At 25 minutes past 8 that morning, he told the senior cabin crew member to prepare for a landing somewhere on Sulawesi Island. He then made a PA, apologizing to the passengers, telling them there had been a navigation problem and that they would be landing in a few minutes. He admitted that
CSA lines 8379er, line up and wait runway 24.
Put the plane down somewhere. This wasn't perhaps the most reassuring PA, but the passengers, like the pilots,
Hotel Sierra, Lima Delta Charlie, handling started TOBT in 22:17 minutes.
Pilots now began setting up for their approach to the airport. Normally at this point, they would be able to review the airport chart and plan things like which flap setting they should use on the approach and how much braking they should use on landing. They would also be able to review the weather so that they could prepare for any crosswind by approach.
Cancel line 8383, line up and wait runway 24.
Without knowing the radio frequency of any nearby control towers, and without even knowing which airport's charts to look at, the pilots were coming in blind. All they could do was hope that the runway could take their plane when it landed. Unfortunately for Flight 782, the airport they were approaching was not meant to take Boeing 737s. The biggest aircraft which regularly landed there was the Fokker 28, a much smaller regional jet.
Austrian Air Force 2264, line up and wait runway 24.
But the pilots were running out of time. Their sole focus now was getting the plane down and getting it stopped on the runway. The captain took control from the first officer. As the more experienced pilot, he was better placed to carry out the landing. The first officer then began to call out the approach checklist, and the crew configured the aircraft for landing, lowering the flaps and the gear. The airport had a control tower, and there were other aircraft in the area which would be in the on that morning. Nobody at the airport knew, as they went about their business, that a fully loaded Boeing 737 was now bearing down on its runway. Pilots could only hope that nobody would get in their way as they neared the airport. This would be the first time in the captain's career that he would be landing without clearance. The passengers watched nervously out their windows as they got lower and lower, the engines revving up and down as the captain adjusted the speed. As the plane neared the threshold, the automated voice of the cockpit began counting down the aircraft's power from the runway. It was the moment of truth. At 20 minutes past 9
Spirit Wings 8700, handling started TOBT in 1408 minutes.
Gradually brought the aircraft to a stop. Everyone on board had survived their meal. Once he had pulled up at the gate, the captain figured out to his shock that he had landed at Tandoulaka Airport, all the way south on the island of Sumba. He contacted Adamair Operations Center in Jakarta, who told him to disembark the passengers and wait for the arrival of the Adamair team from Jakarta, which would include maintenance engineers to inspect the aircraft. When this crew arrived later that day, they fixed the aircraft and then flew it back to Jakarta without passengers, where it was quarantined by Indonesia's National Transportation Safety Commission. The captain was later fired by Adamair. The reason that the inertial reference system switched over to the faulty unit mid-flight, causing the turn, was never determined. But the story of Flight 782 doesn't end there. The investigation which followed the incident unveiled deep-seated issues at Adamair, which had been festering for years. It found glaring deficiencies in how the airline maintained its aircraft, with repeated problems going unchecked, and maintenance actions being limited in many cases, simply swapping out different components, resetting circuit breakers, and cleaning electrical privileges. This created a culture where problems with aircraft were tolerated, and where pilots were put under pressure to fight aircraft which they knew to be faulty. What happened Flight 782 was really just the tip of the iceberg for an organization which was corrupt to the core. Just a year after this incident, a different Adamair 737 crashed into the Makassar Strait, killing all 102 people.
Cityliner 2831, line up and wait runway 24.
On board. You can tap here on the screen to see the chilling similarities between this accident and the case of Flight 782.
How internet brainwash is really down. We cannot raise a generation of kids that are this tuned out, that are this rude, that are this violent.
I think seventh grade, yes, it was one of the fourth grade level. People have been sharing videos of their children literally having meltdowns after taking the iPad away from them. What's wrong?
Qatari 3416, handling started TOBT in 19er, 40 minutes.
Too much stimulation for kids today. That's the problem, is they don't fill that void in their own imagination anymore. They just get that information given to them. What were shows that you watched when you were a kid? I'm not saying like Nickelodeon Disney shows. I'm saying like kid shows. Like Maxie. You remember that? Anybody remember that? Like Dora? Yeah, it was like very elongated, instant gratification content. It's in
stories about brain rot destroying Generation Alpha.
That is not something unique to Gen Alpha in any way at all. I think that is unique to all of us. Or not unique. I think that's relatable to all of us. Anybody that lived during the internet era could have access to effectively unlimited information.
It's gotten so bad that
It's not just Gen Alpha dealing with that problem. We dealt with it
the
too.
Oxford Dictionary made brain rot the 2024 word of the year. But although everyone is complaining about brain rot, most people still don't understand what it is exactly or how much damage it's causing. Today, we'll break it down like never before and show with.
What would you say, chat? What would you say brain rot is? Low attention span, useless slop that provides momentary gratification, but hindsight, nothingness.
Wizair68467.
Brain rot, but that's not the problem with like what kids are consuming. Like, low ticker fade is a meme that is, I would say, primarily consumed by Gen Z. I think Gen Alpha brain rot is like people that actually watch Skibbity Toy. People that genuinely watch Coconut. People that genuinely like are in tune with those fucking stupid trends that we get clips of and we're like, oh, this is funny, but they're actually like consumed by it.
Proof how brain rot is destroying an entire generation. The disturbing rise of a brain rot. Brain rot is the idea that exposure to certain content can turn you into an idiot. It's based on the belief.
Okay, I don't know why I think that's funny. But the image
Content can.
the image
It's based on the belief that the internet is rotting the brains of kids who spend too much time watching.
oh fuck no. Is this real? No, this kid's playing Minecraft creative PE. Number one, that's the biggest problem we got going on. Okay? Get this kid in survival Minecraft they can spend for his fucking life. What the hell are we doing? This kid's playing creative, just spawning in fucking creepers and bitches and shit. Boring. He has a WWE ring, his phone, and an iPad with Minecraft PE on it at the same time.
But this isn't just some theory. Mom saw it happen to her own son. When the boys were toddlers who played videos on.
You know what they gotta do, dude? I don't know if this is relatable.
Wizair64326. Line up and wait runway 24.
So much as a kid. And some of it's pretty graphic. Okay? I remember being 6 years old watching a lion eat another animal. I'll kill it. Like, they would call it, the lion 70 on its pride. And it would fucking literally take it out. I would watch it rip its fucking organs out. But I honestly think it wasn't traumatic for me. I remember being 6 years old and being like, wow, fascinating. Because I thought animals were so cool. And you're learning something. So it's still engaging you. But you're also like, wow, now I know about fucking zebras. And I know more about how they survive in the rivers they have to cross where they're flooded with crocodiles and there's lions waiting on the other side.
It worked so well that she started calling the iPad peace in a pocket.
Sometimes you have an important phone call or you've got a parent teacher interview or whatever that you just can't be interrupted with it. It's so easy. It's peace in a pocket.
But that peak.
Yeah, I look back at like my childhood, and I remember having an iPad mini, but I was a little bit older when I had one. I was probably 10. Kids today get iPads when they're like 4, and I think that's part of the problem, is they don't know how to have fun without that shit. And so you're introducing it too young to where they're incapable of recognizing, what do I do without this, right? They're reliant on it. I think you giving your young kid an iPad isn't a problem if they understand what to do without it.
By the time her sons were 9 and 7, they were exhibiting disturbing behavior. The boys didn't want to do anything except watch videos online and play games. They didn't even want to go to school or do homework. And when she tried to take the screens away, this happened.
And they would become sort of aggressive and throw tantrums and that sort of thing if they played for ages and ages.
She ended.
Bro, that's kind of why I hate, like, not kid-friendly content. I'm not saying kid-friendly, like Queso is a family-friendly streamer, and he has a wide array of people that watch him, and that's fine, right? I don't like kid content on YouTube where they're like family-friendly, but the adults act like they're kids. Not Ryan's World. You know how Ryan's World, his parents will act like fucking toddlers and Clippy and people like that. I fucking hate those YouTubers. them something to watch that's not just like stupid.
Researchers found that too much screen time physically changes kids' brains.
One result that keeps showing up, parts of the brain related to reading, language, and decision-making are often weaker in kids who have more screen time.
This shrinking of the brain is what we call brain rot, and by the time parents notice, it's already too late. One mom shared a story about her 7-year-old daughter who got an iPad for Christmas. No one realized how addicted this girl was.
I don't know how I'm gonna be a dad.
Qatari 5430, handling started TOBT in 23:01 minutes.
That's like getting upset about that. Like obviously bro's like 5 years old, but I'd be like, bro, you're really tripping about a fucking iPad right now. Like, that would be my response. I'd be like, yo, and I'd try to reason with him, but he's 5, so he's not gonna fucking understand me. I would be sitting down and be like, yo, dog, shut up. For a second, it's an iPad. Why are you crashing out? Not that big a deal. And then he'll calm down. I don't know why I think that would work, but I feel like it would. It definitely won't. It definitely won't. They probably go, and they start sobbing all over themselves.
Was until her birthday party. The house was full of guests, presents, and cake, but none of it mattered. The girl did not talk to any children invited and spent the entire party playing Roblox on her iPad. Generation Alpha.
Wait, what? That's fucking crazy. Was it her? It was her birthday party and she just sat on her iPad the entire fucking time?
Generation Alpha is defined as those born from 2010 to 2024.
Bro. No. That means some of you guys are in Gen Alpha. I thought Gen Alpha was like 2013 or something. Like 2014. Oh, that means,
Easy23631, handling start.
Because that's like 15-year-olds. In 2012, I think it's like a different consensus depending on what website it is.
10 to 2024. The moment they could hold one, these kids had iPads in their hands. That's why they've been hit the hardest by brain rot.
She knew exactly how to start it up. She knew from the get-go. From the moment she wakes up, Violet Bolton can't wait to get on her iPad.
There are about 2 billion.
You know what they just gotta show? That fucking maze video where that weird thing scares you. You know what I'm talking about? Where they'd be like, oh, do you wanna play the maze game? And your friend would be like, yeah. And then after you complete level 3, it jump scares you, and then they would just never draw the iPad again.
What
I'm
happened?
so
You
scared.
want something to eat yet?
Spirit
No.
wins 8700.
Step into the real life. iPad kids. Studies show that kids who spend too much time online are more defiant and rude to their parents. A perfect example of this happened on a flight from Germany in August 2017. The mother and her
Bro, the shit that pisses me off is when a kid's having a tantrum. You ever been to, like, it's always at an Applebee's for them. It's at an Applebee's or a Chili's. And a family's out, you can tell they just don't care about their kid. And their kid's just, like, actively having a tantrum, and they're just not doing anything. They're eating, they're just ignoring the kid like it's a fucking smoke alarm that needs to be changed. Just like a beep, and it's like the kid's actually just and they're just like, so anyways, what do you want to do after this? Can we get bowling? And I'm like, dude, shut your kid up. Like, stop your kid. Can we please get your kid to not do that? It's different if they have like a genuine like medical issue or something, but 99% of the time it's kid crashing.
Her child boarded the plane and right away, you could tell this was an iPad kid.
Bro, another story. I had an iPad. This was when I was in high school. I had an iPad kid sitting behind me.
One more when I come back down.
And he got bored. And he started kicking the back of my chair. And I remember looking back and him looking at me. And he went and stopped for like 5 minutes. I looked back. The mom's asleep. He starts doing it again. Dude, I forgot about this. He starts doing it again. So I fucking look behind, like I'm on window aisle, like window seat. So I look in between the cracks and he sees me again and I go. And I just stare at him. For like 10 seconds. Full stop. Scare the shit out of me.
The mother asked the flight attendant to turn on the Wi-Fi so her child could use their...
That poor kid, you want to stop kicking my chair, dude. I'm not even talking like no teamwork at me. Like that. Like my fucking chair, dude, like stop.
took off, all hell broke loose.
The passengers describe an 8-hour flight from hell with non-stop and nerve-jangling screaming and fussing. They even...
Alright, this is going to be a bit of Schadenfreude. It's going to be a bit of Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude is when you feel joy from other people's pain. When I'm in the back of a plane, and I'm like, oh fuck, I'm like seat 35B in a middle row, and I hear a kid crying in the very distance, but I have my AirPods in, and if I get that, it goes noise canceling and I can't hear him, I just go, in my brain I go, because I know the people that are right next to that kid are not having a good time. I know the people that are right next to that kid are like, oh, you get on a flight and there's a fucking kid crying next to you, oh, it just ruins your day. Like, I'm talking about ruins your day. Now I'm sitting in the back of the plane, I'm like, oh, I got the worst seat on the plane. Full swap, I got the best seat on the plane. I'm far away from that kid that's gonna cry for 6 hours.
Cover your ears to drown out the roll.
No matter what.
Oh my god. Yo, if I'm sitting next to them, chat, you hear this noise non-stop,
Cover your ears.
you're right next to the mom that's like holding the kid that like will not stop crying. How long until you like freak out? I
Wizz
give
Air
myself, like, an hour.
68467, line up and wait runway 24.
Just like slow breathing, and then I hit the fucking the like flight attendant button. Kid's got it. You see that door there? Open that hatch. Whoop! No, that would give me respect. I'm not saying throw the kid out of the plane. I would be mad. I would be mad.
No matter what anyone did, the child wouldn't calm down.
But he was climbing all over the chairs. He was just screaming, would not let up. He was running up and down the aisle.
Yo, that's the guy. This is the guy they interviewed. This close in 12B. Just sit middle seat right next to the fucking kid crying.
Some people say the solution is simple. Punish the kid. Spank them. Take away their devices.
Told him to spank them, bro. The kid's crashing out. I don't know. What do you do? Because he's not like an infant that's crying because he has an accident. That's different. If you're a like 1, 2-year-old and you just look at your pants, you can't talk, you can't walk, you can't do anything. Tape? You're gonna tape your kid's mouth shut? You gotta hit him with that mom stare. That's what you gotta do. You gotta put the fear of God in your kid's eyes from a young age. You know that mom stare where they're like, even though they're not gonna hit you, but it's like you're in tough shit. But if there's a 3-year-old understand the mom stare yet, where they're like, that's the mom stare. It's like, you're fucking around, you don't know your mom's mad at you, you hit a fucking like, you hit a quick turn to look, and they're just like, in the corner. You're like, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna get killed today.
What happens when a kid isn't small anymore? Like this 15-year-old Gen Alpha boy who is 6 feet tall and 270 pounds.
What?
In September of 2022, his mom allegedly took away his phone as punishment. Retaliation, he destroyed the entire house.
Bro, what? I'm just sounding nice. Bro, shattered everything, went to the fridge, literally took everything out of the fridge, fucking shattered it, then threw it onto the fucking island. Over his phone.
And desperate for help, his mother stuck
No,
Cityliner 90054, cleared for takeoff, line 2.
money for repair.
but then the kid could just do it again.
Well, that's going to be the end of this YouTube video, and bye.